I'm here to talk to you, as Luke said, about add-ons. And as you know, over the last year, we've had a lot of new add-ons. And to get started, not going to the next slide, apparently. There we go. To get started, you may know me from Ember Observer. I created Ember Observer and spoke a little bit about it last year at EmberConf. And I also have a few add-ons. ember-try and ember feature flags are the more used of them. And I have a company called Code All Day with my partner Michelle. She's somewhere hopefully in the audience. And we do Ember consulting primarily, also some Rails. So let's take a step back. What is an add-on? And at its basic, an add-on is any NPM package with the Ember Addon keyword. More specifically, an add-on is an Ember CLI add-on because it needs to work with the Ember CLI tool. So if you're not yet using Ember CLI, you can't. It's very difficult to be using any add-ons. And so some of them add to Ember and some of them add to Ember CLI, and they're just packages of reusable functionality. So we've had add-ons since June 19th, 2014, nearly 2 years ago now. And since that time, we've had 2,632 add-ons. How many of you have published add-ons? That's a good portion of the audience. That's very impressive. But that's a large number. How many of those are for real? And to look at that, I developed some criteria to determine which add-ons actually are worth looking at. And so an add-on is active, in my opinion, if a user can tell what it does. So it's got some sort of description in the README, some documentation, a demo. If you can't tell what the add-on is going to do for you, it might as well not exist as a user. It is active. It's intended to be shared. So a lot of those add-ons that have been published are accidentally published private add-ons. I don't know if anybody's accidentally published NPM. I have. If it's not a style guide for a particular website, that's not really reusable. And it's open source, and the repo can be found. So if the add-on, you can't find the code, you can't really judge it for whether or not it's going to be a good use for your application. And it's also active if it's been updated in the last year. This is a new criteria I've added, but a year ago, Ember wasn't even 2.0. And so if we didn't eliminate those add-ons that haven't been touched in a year, we'd have a lot of things that would probably cause us a lot of pain when we tried to use them and might run into things that have been breaking changes. And it's active if it has not been marked deprecated. So sometimes add-ons are sunsetted by their maintainers and they just write, sorry, this is not maintained anymore, or this is deprecated in favor of this other add-on. So we'll eliminate those as well from our set of add-ons that we consider to be active. An add-on is active if it's not a filmery. So if any of you have used Adolfo Boya's excellent book, Ember CLI 101, you may have created one of these add-ons. It takes you through creating an add-on that is a filmery, which just fills in image placeholders with filmery. And there are currently 357 of these. So a lot of people are working through that book. That's very encouraging to see, but as a community, we don't really need more than one filmery add-on to use. And so taking all that into account, we have 1,497 add-ons that are left after we remove all of those that don't meet those criteria. And there are 753 maintainers of those add-ons, and I find that very impressive. And from that, there's 2,288 contributors, GitHub contributors to those add-ons. That's more than double the number of people at this conference that have contributed to this add-on ecosystem. So it's clear we want add-ons as developers of Ember applications. We want them for many of the same reasons we like Ember. We want somebody else to solve the hard problems for us. We want to use a community solution instead of rolling our own and having to maintain it later on when we come back to it. We want to speed up our development. And so somebody must have done this better than I have, and that's what I think all the time when I'm about to try to do something that feels a little bit like somebody should have done it before. So that's when I start looking for an add-on. So yeah, an add-on has already done the work. There's no need to reinvent the wheel, no need to duplicate development time. If we build on what somebody else has built, we can build something even better. and an add-on has done the work better. For instance, if you wanted to use the add-on for Ember Font Awesome, you'll get ARIA roles that you may not have added if you were building it just for yourself. And so we can all build apps that are accessible, building on the work of others without having to do it for our custom apps. And that may, in fact, be the only way apps become accessible, is if it's just easy and happens for you. The community maintains add-ons. They get updated without your direct involvement. If I shelve my app for a year while I work on something else and I come back to it, I can probably just upgrade my add-ons and get compatibility with the latest version of Ember, get any new fixes that have happened over the past year, removal of deprecations, new features. And so not only do we want add-ons that do what we need. So one of the most important parts is an add-on that does what we're looking for. If I'm looking for a particular type of modal dialog or dropdown, I can't just install any add-on. I have to find one that does what I particularly need. And so there are a few ways to find add-ons. One is search npm for the keyword Ember Addon, which, as I said, every Ember CLI add-on has to have that keyword. But this is a little hard to sift through. It's not in any particular order. It might be the latest updated, maybe. And this may look different now. The screenshot's a little bit older. So maybe a better solution is ember-addons.com, which has a stream of published add-ons as they're published, and it's also filterable. And another option is ember-observer.com, which filters out inactive add-ons, categorizes them, and scores them. And so let's talk a little bit about how I personally choose add-ons, and I think a lot of it will be relevant to you as well. Why the add-ons available are amazing. Every dependency is a liability, so you need to really choose carefully when you choose to add one. There have already been a lot of left pad jokes, so I'll sort of leave that out. So first thing I do is find add-ons that claim to do what I need. I look at demos. I look for what I'm particularly looking for. So say I was looking for a modal dialog that would be sort of in place on the page. I would look at that category in Ember Observer for modals. I would look at all the demos and compare them and see how they feel. I would look at the documentation. Then I filter by score. And so since I created Ember Observer, the score means a lot to me. But let me tell you a little bit why I think it should mean something to you. Everything in the score actually represents quality I believe an add-on should have. So there's 1 point for sustainability. And that's represented by how frequently the add-on is updated and how many maintainers there are. There needs to be more than one. It's kind of a bus factor, if you will. Maybe it's not quite, like you might want to look in depth into that a little bit more, but it's a first pass. There's a point for popularity. So there's a point if you're in the top 10% of NPM downloads for Ember, all Ember add-ons. There's a point for interest. That comes from GitHub stars, being in the top 10% of GitHub stars for Ember add-ons. 2 points for being maintained. So one from having a GitHub commit in the last 3 months and one for having a release in the last 3 months. And that may seem kind of short, but at the pace Ember moves, it's actually quite reasonable. There's 2 points for just being activated. So having a repo, it's available, we can find it, and it's open source. A point for having meaningful tests, and that's kind of representing quality. And a point for running those tests in a CI build. And a point for having any documentation, so some indication of how to use that add-on. So after that, I eliminate unmaintained add-ons. So even though maintenance is represented in the Ember Observer score, I then eliminate even add-ons that haven't been updated, haven't been released in 6 months completely from my list when I'm looking personally for an add-on. And I do that because 6 months ago, the latest version of Ember was 2.02. And there are some new paradigms. I mean, sometimes add-ons are just done, but very frequently there's going to be at least a dependency to update, especially in the NPM world. Then I examine the API and code of the add-on. Are there any gotchas? Do I need accessibility support in my app, and this add-on doesn't do this? Do I need it to work on particular browsers or particular mobile platforms, excuse me. And if So maybe I can PR and just fix that for them, but maybe I need to move on. Look at the issues in PRs. Are there lingering issues? Are there PRs that haven't been accepted? Is there a killer issue that means you cannot use this add-on in your application? And then I try likely candidate, and I rinse and repeat until I find one that really fits my needs of what I'm looking to do. So if you didn't find what you need, what do you do then? You build it yourself. And if you're building it yourself, maybe you should make this a community add-on. Maybe it should be available for everybody else. And so then you become a maintainer. Maintainers are the lifeblood of the add-on community. Without them, you couldn't just Ember install Ember CLI SaaS or Ember install anything for that matter because the maintainers of Ember CLI itself. Maintainers want to help. They're not out to just sell you their add-on. They're out to help you build an application faster. And so it's sort of an act of altruism. It could potentially help your career, but for the most part, it's just about being nice and helping the entire community. So when you look at it, you should definitely look into helping out as well. You shouldn't just impose requirements on those maintainers. Excuse me. Maintainers want 10 out of 10. And this really surprised me when I started Ember Observer. I didn't think the score would be that enticing to maintainers, but it has really worked out as a way to, say, get people to add CI builds, get people to add more tests to their add-ons. So as a maintainer, I want my add-ons to be used. So, and along with you, it feels good when people use them and file bugs and we all contribute to a common solution. So here are some more things that I keep in mind as a maintainer. Testing. I'm putting out an add-on, I want to have it be well tested. I don't want to publish an add-on and suddenly see 5 bugs. That feels bad. Tests provide me with context when I return to a project. So these are side projects for most people. And so if you have to leave it alone for a month or two, it really helps when you come back and you find tests to give you kind of some insight into what's going on. Dependencies. I don't want to bring any dependencies that I will force upon my users. So I don't want to, say, write my add-on in CoffeeScript if that means my end users will have to install CoffeeScript or have that in their build process. It's definitely something to keep in mind, especially with recent NPM issues. Something else I like to do is test against varied dependencies. I also created ember-try, which lets you run your test suite against different Ember versions. And so if you support a wide range of Ember versions, you can, other people can use your apps whether or not they're stuck on 1.13 or they're on the latest canary. And testing against canary versions. Are there similar solutions? So if I'm creating an add-on that does, say, feature flags, are there 3 other feature flags add-ons, and should we all get together in a room and make the ultimate community solution? And the answer is probably yes. Some add-ons have done this already. Luke orchestrated the creation of Ember CLI deploy from all the different deploy add-ons, and it just seemed, as mentioned in the keynote yesterday, it just seemed kind of wasteful if we were all doing these different things. We got together and we got an even better solution out of it. Documentation. You need to tell people what your add-on does. As I said before, the criteria for choosing an add-on, nobody knows what the add-on does, they can't use it. They won't know what to do with it. Semver, whether or not you should follow Semver. So Ember follows Semver, and it definitely makes it easier for users if you follow Semver, and they can know that a breaking version will only change the leftmost digit. Having a 1.0, so a lot of add-ons or a lot of general JavaScript libraries tend to stay in 0.0.46 and on. But there's no reason not to go to 1.0 at some point because you can always make a breaking change and go to 2.0. Be aware of private APIs. So if you're using private APIs, you need to be aware that maybe Ember will break your add-on in its very next release, and your users will be contacting you in the middle of the night saying, your add-on broke my app. I upgraded and now I can't do anything. Can you please fix this? But there are some very good uses of private APIs. So add-ons are increasingly being used for experiments. And if you want to experiment, you might need to use some private APIs to get us that kind of add-on that you might not even expect to exist. And this is a quote from Yehuda Katz from an RFC about add-ons needing to use private APIs, and they consider it to be later in that RFC, consider it to be a problem if they do need to do that long term, but it is a great way to experiment. Be quiet. This may seem a little unusual. So it's actually about not using console.log everywhere. You don't want to pollute the build output. You don't want to pollute their console in development. And Ember CLI gives you some tools to use so that if people run with, say, a silent flag, your add-on doesn't output. Make things like logging configurable. Be aware of deprecations. So a new Ember version could deprecate some behavior that your add-on is using. In that case, you want to fix that probably pretty quickly, or at least be able to note on your project where it's going to go and what it's going to do with the deprecation eventually. On another note, if you're following Ember, deprecate your own APIs prior to moving on. Be open to community contribution. So I find this hardest as a maintainer because I find it hard to spend enough time at all on my add-ons, let alone find time to collaborate with others. But in medium and long term, it's very important to do this because at some point, you're probably going to be done with this add-on. You're not going to be using in your day-to-day work, and it would be really great if you can hand it off to somebody else or there's a community around it so that it's not just lost when you're moving on. Your add-on might have or need its own ecosystem. So there's some add-ons that have developed their own ecosystem, some with intention, like Ember CLI Deploy has Ember CLI Deploy plugins. And some kind of just sprouted it. Liquid Fire, for instance, has some add-ons to add transitions or do transitions with different libraries. And so at that point, you've got your own ecosystem, and you're almost like Ember, but you're a smaller team, and you have to keep up with that kind of community. So it's definitely something to keep in mind when you publish an add-on or when you have an add-on that it may be growing to that point. And if you get ahead of it, or if you plan for it, it'll be a lot easier. Your package.json. So Ember Observer and Ember Addon search both the title and the description of the add-on, and they use the repo URL to let people link to your add-on. And if those parts of your package.json are not filled out, it'll be harder for users to find your add-on. So some observations on the add-on community. There have been some somewhat novel uses of add-ons. Experiments and proof of concepts are the one that comes most to mind. As Yehuda and Tom mentioned yesterday, with add-ons, you no longer need to contribute right to Ember core to contribute significantly to the Ember community. Things like Ember concurrency are coming out and being things that are worthy of being part of Ember potentially, but you can now use them just as an add-on and it can be experimented with outside of Ember. Ember Engines is the most notable, I think, example of a proof of concept or something developing outside of Ember that may eventually be part of core Ember. And Ember Computed Decorators is another example of what might be a future availability, but lets you use that kind of API today. Polyfills. So another use has been to create add-ons that bring old behavior forward, Ember legacy views and Ember legacy controllers. And another thing has been to bring new behavior back. So Ember new computed and Ember get owner polyfills that let you use those new features of Ember in older versions and ease upgrading. And it's really great to look at these add-ons because it just means that lets you have the ability to move between Ember versions much more easily. And so something new we're doing on Ember Observer is running ember-try against the top 100 add-ons to determine which versions of Ember they're compatible with. And so now in Ember Observer, we're showing, tests ran successfully against Ember 1.12 to 2.4 based on us actually running their tests. And so we'll eventually expand this to all add-ons, and I think that's kind of a novel use, is kind of looking at the whole add-on set. And the other thing we're doing is running Ember Canary against those top 100 add-ons nightly so that we can tell if Canary breaks a significant number of popular add-ons. Amazing add-ons are created every day. Every time I look at them, there's something new and interesting and something that surprises me. And every time I go through and review add-ons, things are gaining points. It's just the quality is increasing, common add-ons are merging. It's just very, very impressive to me. And I was very impressed with that number of over 2,000 contributors. I just think the people are working very well on this, and the whole community has somewhere to contribute now. If you use an add-on, you contribute in the smallest way. You can fix their package.json. You can make the documentation a little bit clearer. You can remove a deprecation. The community really is amazing. We have such a choice of add-ons. We're spoiled for choice. A lot of the other frameworks don't have this kind of ecosystem yet, and I think it's just a really great selling point of Ember. As maintainers, we need to publish wisely, be aware, and work together to make our add-on system even better. Thank you very much.
Given that fastboot is going to be a kind of a big selling point for any add-on in the future, how is this going to be measured if an add-on is compatible with fastboot?
So it's just a matter of whether or not an add-on will break at the very first pass. It's just a matter of whether an add-on will break fastboot. So we're adding a command ember-try fastboot that will boot up the add-on in fastboot, make one request, make sure it doesn't prevent the host application from running in fastboot. And if it doesn't, we're going to be running that along with the other ember-try stuff against all of the add-ons. Probably first the top 100, and then after that all of them. So that'll be a nice little check mark and potentially part of the score on Ember Observer.
Hi, Katie. Great presentation, by the way.
Thank you.
I was wondering what additional criteria you could use to evaluate add-ons now that one of the major issues that we find with add-ons is there are good add-ons that are not maintained and widely used and are preventing people from upgrading, and regardless have very high scores on Ember Observer simply because of their popularity and the fact that they were reviewed a long time ago.
The add-ons are actually reviewed every time they update a new release, and so that shouldn't be an issue. If it is, there's a little correction link on Ember Observer, and so they actually should lose an entire point for, if they get marked deprecated, they lose the score entirely. They get marked deprecated. And if they are, I don't know what you mean by not maintained, but if they don't have a commit in the last 3 months and they don't have a release in the last 2 months, that's 2 points right there. So they should not be able to get higher than a 7.
It has an 8, but the
okay.
one I'm thinking of, which is Ember Table.
Okay.
Hey there. So I want to ask the exact opposite. So for example, if you have a very small add-on that doesn't really need to be maintained because the part of Ember is very stable since the very beginning. So for example, components or whatever that wraps, for example, a external library, a jQuery library or whatever. And that gets very low points because there is no need to update it frequently and there is no need for additional maintainers.
I get asked this a lot. So I think that at the very least, you might want to upgrade Ember and make sure there's no deprecations with the add-on. And so I think right now 3 months is a reasonable point, but it's always been something I would consider lengthening as the Ember ecosystem matures. That's fine.
Cool, thanks. Let's have another round of applause for Katie.
Thank you.